Well, well, well. Good evening, everybody. Thanks. Hey, everybody, it's Wednesday, July 9, 2025, and this is the third night of readings and presentations at Summer Fishtrap. My name's Mike Midlow. I'm super happy to have you all here. Thanks to all of you from the Wallowa County community who came out tonight. It's always great when the public comes out and kind of sees what's been happening here during the days. It's cooling down a little bit. There's a nice breeze. We've had a beautiful week so far, and tonight's no different. I also want to welcome all of you who are watching fishtrap.org, the live stream or the recording afterwards. It's great to have you folks tuning in through our website too. I want to mention a couple program partners here before we get going. The Kinsman Foundation, Eastern Oregon University, and there are a lot of EOU MFA students here this week, and they're fun to have around, and I'm sure they're great additions to your workshops. Wallowa Lake Lodge, who hosts us here each year, and the Book Loft, the local bookstore and enterprise who's come up here. I like that the Book Loft gets a round of applause every night. And if you buy a book tonight, at the end of the night, get it signed by your favorite author or any of the writers here this week, the Book Loft will donate 20% of the proceeds back to Fishtrap, so that helps a lot too. It's a feel-good thing all the way around. We also want to thank the Wallowa County Chamber of Commerce, Wild Carrot Herbals, a local company here, Winding Waters Medical Clinic, Pier 303, which is a fishmonger here in the county, and M. Crow, who all contributed things for our lottery baskets, etc. I'll let you know more. But there are a bunch more sponsors who gave at a smaller level at what they could. There's a page on the Summer Fishtrap drop-down that shows all of the sponsors for Summer Fishtrap. It's really impressive to see how the community has reached out to help support this event that happens every year. All right, we have 3 more all-star readers coming up tonight. The first one is Karen Auvenin. Karen has come to Summer. She is launching her second year-long writers workshop, which means she'll be here this year and next summer. So we get to look forward to that. Karen is always a blast to have around and supports us so much. Thanks, Karen. Karen Auvenin is an award-winning poet, writer, mountain woman, outlier, and lifelong Westerner, and the author of the memoir Rough Beauty, 40 Seasons of Mountain Living, which was a finalist for the Colorado Book Award and the Willow Award. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Lit Hub, Real Simple, Westward, Terrain.org, and Deep Wild, and is forthcoming in Cutthroat. Her fiction has been nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes, and her poetry has won 2 Academy of American Poets Awards. She is the 2024 winner of the Barry Lopez Prize in Creative Nonfiction. A collection of short fiction about outliers in the West is forthcoming, and she is at work on a novel. Karen is also on the graduate faculty in nature writing at Western Colorado University and directs the Creative Minds Residential Academic Program at Colorado University Boulder. Whew! Welcome, Karen. Come on up.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Shannon, for the Hail Mary here, wherever you are. Yay! This is hot off the presses. Not that it's new, but I decided I needed to print it. Anyway, so the story is I printed 4 things to read, and I didn't want to read any of them, and so I printed this one. Because, I'm a writer. I'm currently working on a novel about my great-aunt Nina, and this is the essay that got me writing the novel, and this is the essay that won the Barry Lopez Prize. I'm reading an excerpt from it, because it's long, and I'm going to try not to have my papers go into the wind here. I do want to give you a bit of a trigger warning. There is strong material about women's lives and the things that happen to women and family dynamics, so take care of yourself. This is called A Story of Silence. It has 2 epigraphs, one from Emily Dickinson, of course, They shut me up in prose as when a little girl. They put me in the closet because they liked me still. And the second one is from Isak Dinesen. In the end, silence will speak. My great aunt Nina lived in a home, a ghost to her family and to herself. The fragment of her story fell to me when I was young, a feather blown through an open window before being whooshed suddenly away. Nina was spoken of in whispers, in the silence that comes with a grimace and a pause, the distant look of my mother trying to avoid explaining something she didn't understand. Born to turn-of-the-century Finnish farmers in a time before running water and electricity, Nina belonged to a past distinct from my own, with television sets cranked on all day, Pepsi by the can, and summer boredom. Hers was a passage from a dusty book. Mom mentioned a farm somewhere in Wisconsin. I imagined cows and chickens and rolling hills. The rest was silence. Nina's circumstances never explained, I conjured a story full of the kind of bucolic pleasure I'd read about in Little House on the Prairie, one tinged with tragedy. Picturing a girl my age caught in the spider web of a handicap, transfixed by Down syndrome or a physical deformity, a daughter whose architecture was out of place in a rural landscape and required too much in a family where it was all hands on deck. Why else would she be sent away? The younger sister to my own grandmother, Alice, a surprising fiery Finn with auburn hair who drank too much. The Nina I invented was different in every way. She was quiet, too delicate for farm life, and conceived of the world by curves and commas, gaps and unarticulated desire, when what was asked for was logic and straight lines, perfect angles, obedience, and sharp edges. In her time, the wheel of each day was kept in motion by bodies that could ride, hunt, trap, milk, haul, scrub, and knead. Nina could do none of these. She needed looking after, someone with her to make sure she didn't burn herself near the cook stove or fall into the creek and drown. Eventually, logic told me the family was forced to place her in a home for the developmentally disabled where she could be better cared for. I imagine they did so resignedly and with sadness. The silence surrounding Nina's stories must have been the silence of a tragedy that had broken hearts. Nina was always spoken of in the past tense. For years, I assumed she died, young, long before I was ever born. All of this was a lie. My family reveled in the stories of men who came before us. My Italian father, an only child who briefly attended Catholic boarding school in the late 1940s. His father, Pete, who spent his early years in an orphanage and herded sheep, alone outside Price, Utah, when he was just 14. And his father, Bernardo, who mined diamonds in Africa and later guarded the king of Italy. Nina belonged to my mother's clan. We never spoke of them. I mistook this story for insignificance. I thought their lives had nothing to do with my own. Looking back now, I can see my life fashioned by distance, not just the loners on my father's side, but in particular the complete absence of history of my mother's. For years, Nina's story floated inside the gaps that formed me, a formless remembrance from people I knew almost nothing about. From the farm, they'd scattered across the upper Midwest to the West Coast like seeds scrambled in a whirlwind. I rarely saw any of them, a remarkable fact considering my grandmother was one of 10 children. I met a handful of cousins once when I was 6, and I could count the times I'd visited with my grandparents on one hand. It's no surprise then that an undercurrent of rootlessness runs in me. Despite my instinct for connection and place, I've always been an outlier. I can't quite figure out where I belong. All my life I've longed for family, for ties to my people, and in particular for the stories of women. But until the death of my mother, this urge remained an unspoken yearning. Mom died after a long, unspectacular decline, traversing 2 years in which she never left her nursing home bed. She was 73. I can still smell the stench of that place. It was the tragic culmination to an unhappy life. Nursing facilities and bad ends run in my family. My mother's parents suffered a similar fate, dying in their late 60s, just 1 year apart, not long after they too had been moved into a home. Would the same happen to me? Propelled by an instinct I could not name, I dug up what I could about the people in my mother's family, tracing the line through the women that came before me. Information was scarce, but even the smallest fragments exploded the story I'd formed. My family was not from Wisconsin, but the wide, windswept prairie of North Dakota. They'd farmed wheat on a sizable plot, worked by every son in the family. My great-grandfather was a man of standing in the county, active on the farm board, and a deacon in the Apostolic Lutheran Church. Buried in the census data was one final piece of the plot. Nina had been born without any handicap at all. The home I'd heard about all those years ago was a nursing facility where she died at the age of 86, the year I turned 34. Before that, she'd been institutionalized for nearly 35 years in the North Dakota Hospital for the Insane, committed by her father when she was just 21. When long ago I had asked my mother what happened to Nina, she would say, "I don't know," in a distant way, and then stop. I think now what she was really saying was, "I don't want to know." Words that revealed everything about the nothing of women in my family, their absences, the deliberate amnesia of people who didn't speak of them. I filled in what I could about Nina's life. Like all farm children, Nina attended school until the 8th grade and lived 18 years on the farm backed against the South Dakota border in the run-up to the Great Depression. By all reports, her childhood was unremarkable. Nina appears in her younger sister Viola's recounting of those happy years as a beloved playmate. Together, they built a playhouse on a tiny plot cornered by 4 trees and furnished it with boxes and whatever they could salvage from the shed. In the afternoon, they went there together for tea and pretended to be elegant ladies. I can conjure 2 young girls sipping water from chipped cups. It's important for me to see the story, to flesh out their lives, to know these women. One wears an old veil hat, the other a bit of fur fallen from the cuff of her mother's good coat. They hold their pinkies out when they lift their cups and giggle and speak in formal, stilted way, playing the part of ladies they've seen in movies in town, their voices trilling with an accent that they think is prettier than their Finnish Midwestern inflection with its O's and D's and do's. Being a lady is in an elegant house with servants and dinners served in courses and tea with friends in the garden was so much from farm life. It made them giddy. Ladyhood was a dream as golden and shining as a sunrise over the wheat field. It was a bit of beauty on a dingy summer day. But instead of being a lady, Nina would serve one. At 19, during the first years of the Depression, the 1930 census lists her as servant for a professor who taught at the Normal State and Training School in Ellendale, 17 miles from her family's farm in Ada Township. By the next census, Nina is listed as an inmate in the state hospital. Nearly 3 years after my mother died, I hear the story. Something snapped. The picture of the 2 little girls dissolved. What is left is farm life, labor, heartbreak, and transgression. Nina took up a knife. This fact is faded as a Midwestern sky. It comes to me as a whisper from a distant cousin I have never met, someone who tells it and then disappears. I am playing telephone with the life of someone who lived and breathed, trying to hear what's on the line. My sources, rumors and whispers, a single picture, census books, and a couple of Social Security documents. There is not much, but there is this. Nina had a knife and she attacked her father. For every action, we are taught there is an equal and opposite reaction. But the laws of physics don't apply equally to women and men. The law of the father is always greater. I find myself hoping it was a big knife, as if she could earn what came next. Her older sister Hilda was there. The story comes from her, passed to her grandson, who whispers it to me. Hilda saw Nina with a knife. She went with her father to take Nina away. That day, a series of explosions. First a collision, then shock, then silence. The landscape of my family disrupted, forever altered. In my mind, it was a humid North Dakota summer day. Nina's back is toward me. In her hand, a knife raised over her head. Her father, a stout Finn with a grim mouth, holds the hand by the wrist as he drags her toward the car, which only he drives. Nina is wearing a light print dress above the knee and sturdy brown shoes. It is 1933. The Depression is deep and many will feel the effects for years. Nina is just 21. I am unable to see her face, no matter how hard I try. She stumbles on the hem of her skirt as her father drags her forward. Sometimes she falls to her knees. But he does not stop, hauling her across the dirt and the grass of the yard, and Hilda watches. She is witness. If anyone else is present, they say nothing. Instead, they gape as Nina shrieks and her father wrenches her body away. The air is thick with the metallic zing of cicadas. The large elm in the front of the house drapes, exhausted by heat. Wild grape and June berries have just come on. There's a scent of prairie rose. Does her father tie her wrists or have her younger brothers restrain her in the back seat of the car, hunched on either side, making a cage of their arms? Perhaps Nina does not resist. Perhaps after this one act of defiance, she does what she is told. Why does Hilda decide to go with them? Does she sit in the front seat while Nina is held captive in the back? Or does she clasp her sister's hand, powerless to stop what has been set in motion? There are at least 3 of them in the car, and they drive off down the road, and the putter of the engine is fading, the family watching. Everyone knows what is happening. All but one will never speak of it again. Hilda would become the keeper of her sister's story, preserving the memory like pieces of a shattered heirloom collected in a box. The fragments are sharp. They can draw blood, so Hilda will keep the whole of it to herself. Instead, she displays a photograph of Nina on her mantle in the home she makes nearly 1,500 miles from the prairie home of her childhood. Her grandson tells me the photo was always there for as long as he can remember. When Hilda tells the story of what happened, she will repeat the words knife and father to her grandson, who will tell me. She will also insist Nina was not crazy. She will repeat these words. Then she will say nothing more. Besides the factual evidence written in the census ledgers, daughter, servant, inmate, there is the portrait Hilda kept on her mantle. In it, Nina is a young woman with finger waves and a dark Betty Boop curl. Her smile is open-mouthed and flat, revealing crooked teeth. Her dress is loose-fitting, a sturdy cotton, black with buttons down the front. A white lace collar crowns her shoulders. A thin strand of pearl rests on her neck. Both photographers' props. Nina's head tilts in the way women were taught to pose. The look is expected, soft and demure. In the picture, Nina is smiling. She looks like a good girl, and she wears the pearls for purity, for elegance. The photo is black and white on cardstock taken sometime during the Depression, and the photographer has tinted her cheeks pink to make her look pretty. And she does. In fact, she is beautiful. Her gaze is so soft, it reminds me of a deer, the way their eyes open in the dark wood, the way they are always watching. Nina looks into the camera. I can see the photographer's lights reflected in her eyes. I stare at the photo, searching for something that will tell me what happened. I wish I could hear what she has to say. What made Nina pick up the knife? What is the name of the thing that rushed up in her? What circumstance drove her to attack, to defend? Did her body boil? Was it instinct or the final straw? My own experience, the experience of every woman I know, compels me to expect the worst. Was it her father, her employer, a brother? The answer is silence. Hilda, who kept the photograph for almost 70 years, would say Nina wasn't crazy, and then she would say nothing more. My own mother would say she lived in a home, and then she would say nothing more. My grandmother Alice would tell a cousin that Nina had a fiancé who died in the war, perhaps the saddest thing my grandmother could imagine, because she could not begin to think of what really happened, and then she would say nothing more. Silence is a story, too. The word Finney was written on Nina's life the day she disappeared into the North Dakota hospital. She ceased to be, full stop. as if the institution, the factory-like box building with windows and a tall smokestack, was amber and she was an insect caught and preserved. Although the length of her life would be long, the memory of it, the memory of her and the girl that she was, has been erased. My aunt was buried alive. On her grave marker, a final piece of evidence, the word daughter. Nina would forever be a child of the family. In my family, the word daughter meant possession. I belonged to my father as an object he could put and place, not a person, but a thing over which he exerted complete control. He could slap me, hit me, because I belonged to him, and I would do as I was told. When I was 3, he used the flat of his palm on my bare bottom. When I was 5, it was his belt. More terrifying, though, was his anger, his menace. When I was 28 and had changed my name to my mother's surname, in what I now recognize as my first attempt to make contact with my mother's, he yelled into the answering machine, "You are my daughter. I am your father. You will call me back or I will come find you. I know where you work." I slept with a knife beneath my pillow. I moved out of my apartment and spent the summer in a tent in the woods where no one could find me. When I was a teenager, my father had routinely threatened to send me to the nuns. Behind their cloistered walls, my father would say, I would learn to behave as a lady, to have the smirk of disobedience slapped off my face. There, along with the other girls, I would be shoved into a mold and emerge a more palatable version of myself. Try it, I said. For me, insolence was survival, a fire I kept burning in the body he tried to strap into submission. When Dad said yes, I said no. Someone had to. My brothers and mothers cowered before him, his temper sudden as a riptide. My father's open hand was a bully stick, but far worse were the words he used to dismember and cut. All of us still carry those scars. My father imagined the nuns could contain me. Was that what happened to Nina? Madness is a woman's disease. Crazy is shorthand for women who don't do as they're told. That a single common diagnosis, hysteria, is linked to the female body is no mistake. As early as the 4th century, women's complaints were attributed to hysterikos, literally of the womb. Later, the organ was imagined to detach itself and travel the body, producing whatever passed for irrational behavior. It could be public disagreement with a husband, it could be disobeying his order, it could even have been refusing to do the housework. These are not the Dark Ages circumstances, archaic ideas living in a dim past. As recently as 1960, a woman could be institutionalized on her husband's word. Today, there are plenty of young women who dabble in sex and drugs, whose wayward demeanors don't fit the family profile, that are shipped off to prison-like rehab facilities or boot camp-style boarding schools in order to shape them up. The treatment for hysteria looks like madness too: shock therapy, hydrotherapy, insulin therapy, all meant to jolt the body into submission. The womb was a caged animal, an organ with a mind of its own. Earliest remedies before science included placing strong smelling salts under the nose and sweet smelling perfumes near the vagina to lure the wandering womb, hysterica passio, back into place. Uterine and vulvar massage were also deployed to produce a convulsion, orgasm, that calmed the patient, but only if performed by a male doctor. Of course, the most widely recognized, ask me about that later, okay. Of course, the most widely recognized, I got lots of stories. Most widely recognized artifact in the treatment of madness and lunacy was the straitjacket, or camisole de force. Invented in France at the end of the 18th century and thought to be a more humane alternative to the ropes and chains previously used to restrain mental patients. It was made of canvas. The camisole de force, literally strong jacket, was used to control patients afflicted with everything from mania and self-harm to depression and worry. Too often it restrained patients, sometimes for days, in understaffed hospitals. The truth of the device lies in this simple fact: some prisons use the straitjackets as a means of torture. As outerwear, the camisole de force was a garment meant to confine, but it was always about control. Later, it slipped closer to the skin, becoming intimate wear, now simply the camisole, one of the many required layers of Victorian clothing worn by women beneath corsets. Its purpose? Modesty. By the late 20th century, the camisole evolved into a sexy bit of lingerie, erotic rather than functional in nature. The evolution and usefulness of the garment lays bare the Gordian knot of desire and abject fear surrounding the female body. In the end, Nina was defined by her relationship to men, daughter, servant, and mate. One was her father, one was her master, another her warden. In the history of women, these are the same thing. A chain reaction ignited that late summer day when her father dragged her off. It was his word against hers, and no one believes a woman. So Nina was shut up, held for decades in a hospital that practiced shock therapy and lobotomy and forced sterilization and grueling weeks full of farm labor. By the time she was 31, the hospital entered its dark ages, when the staff were too few in number and too poorly trained, and the facility crowded, with patients sleeping 2 and 3 to a bed and confined as a matter of course, either in straitjackets or in small rooms for days. How many treatments did it take to erase the young girl with the knife? Was she left in a tub of water for days? Was her frontal lobe scrambled at the end of an ice pick? How many times was her body used as an instrument for another's profit or pleasure? How long before she learned to do exactly as she was told? Before the resistance lodged in her mind and was extricated in the most brutal ways? The answer lies in the Nina who emerged 35 years later, a woman who barely spoke and always wore dresses, pleasant in every way. By that time, the words that articulated all that had happened had been buried in the deep grave of her body, the logic of her mind short-circuited. It was no longer possible to bear witness, to say all that was unsaid all those years. Instead, her one-word answers were all that was left, and they speak volumes. Trauma by trauma, the young woman in the picture, the girl taking tea with a sister, had been erased. Staff at the home where she came to live thought she had been born that way. Also, and so had I. This was the Nina I had imagined years ago. By the time Nina was deinstitutionalized at the age of 56, the same age as I am now, she was a heavy-set woman, a fact mentioned to me as much as her silence, as if it provides some kind of supporting evidence for her deficiency. She lived for a brief time in a nursing home near my grandmother Alice before ending up in another in North Dakota near the old farm, which had since been abandoned. There she lived the rest of her years without visitors. When she died, there was no funeral, no obituary in the paper, just the memory of a woman who loved to put on an apron and help peel potatoes in the kitchen, who loved candy, snatching it by the fistful in a dish that was put out. The staff who recall Nina speak fondly of her, saying she was sweet, quiet and sweet, childlike. Time for Nina moved in reverse. She was no longer the young woman with a Betty Boop curl wearing a white lace collar and pearl necklace, and she was no longer not crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Before we get to our next reader, I was just thinking, games are fun. Helping your friends out is fun. Winning things is fun. As Reverend Clarissa said today, can't win if you don't play. Why don't you buy a raffle ticket this week? And it's like 1 for $5 or 6 for $20, and there are several different gift bags and even an opportunity to win registration for Summer Fishtrap next summer. You can buy raffle tickets up at the Fishtrap table in the lodge, and there are a bunch of cool things, including a basket from Pier 303, M. Crow, and of course the registration for Summer Fishtrap. It's easy to have fun. Okay, here's our second reader. Joe Wilkins has been around Fishtrap for a long time. I look back, and he was a Fishtrap fellow in 2004 and has taught at Summer Fishtrap several times since. He led the outpost, Fishtrap's outpost on the Snake River 2 or 3 years ago, and it's just fun to have Joe and his family around. Walter helped us haul gear here on Monday. Thanks, Walter. And so I want to tell you a little bit about Joe Wilkins. Joe Wilkins' debut novel, Fall Back Down When I Die, was praised as remarkable and unforgettable in a starred review at Booklist. A finalist for the first novel prize from the Center for Fiction and the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Award, Fall Back Down When I Die won the High Plains Book Award and has subsequently been translated into French, Spanish, Italian, and German editions. Yeah. Wilkins is also the author of a memoir, The Mountain and the Fathers, and 4 collections of poetry, including Thieve When We Were Birds, winner of the Oregon Book Award. Yeah, of course. His latest novel, The Entire Sky, is now out from Little Brown. Wilkins was born and raised in eastern Montana and now lives with his family in the foothills of the Oregon Coast Range, where he directs the creative writing program at Linfield University. Give it up for Joe Wilkins.
So, when I was 9, my father died. And then a few years later, my heartbroken grandfather sold the family ranch. I'd only known ranch work. That meant I had to get another job. And so I got a job as an assistant janitor at the county school. And it was as bad as it sounds. Lots of scraping gum off the undersides of things. And yeah, terrible job. What made it kind of amazing, though, was that the first day I showed up there, there was another young man at work there. And I lived in a county with a little less than 2,000 people outside of a town with about 100 people. And you knew everybody. And I didn't know him. Not only that, he wore baggy jeans and the knees were blown out. And he had old flannels that he wore. And he wore his blonde hair down on his shoulders, and he had earrings in both ears. This was Montana in 1994. You didn't do that then, but he did. And he would bring his guitar to work. And on lunch breaks, he would play acoustic Nirvana tunes. And in the way of young people, we were almost immediately best friends. We even started to make plans for him to go to school there and maybe even live with us, because his situation, he was living with some relatives, was not good. And I didn't quite know the contours of that situation. And then one Monday in August, he didn't show up for work. And then he didn't show up Tuesday or Wednesday, and I drove out into the Bull Mountains to try to figure out what was going on. And it was tough. I finally heard from a cousin that an uncle or maybe some other, second cousin, but someone older had gotten crossways of him and said, you can either do what I say or you can get on a bus. And he got on the bus. And so his story for me was one of lostness. He was lost to me. And I've written about him in other ways. And then in the spring of 2020, I'd been working on a novel that wasn't working for way too long. And suddenly, as we were so far from one another, that story came barreling back to me. And my first thought was, well, he was lost, but what if I tried to find him? What if I tried to find him on the page? And so that's where The Entire Sky takes off, is attempting to find someone like my long-ago friend on the page. It opens in Montana in April of 1994, a few days after Kurt Cobain's suicide, with a young man on the run, and he's He's trying to run away from a real terrible situation with some family, and he's attempting to run back to Seattle, where he's from, and he gets turned around and ends up going east, out onto the prairie, which is where I'm from. But I want to start this reading with a section from, so it moves across about a week in April 1994, but then there's these sections that it sort of intrude, and they're called before. Of course, we're all carrying all our befores with us all the time, right? And this is a section from his before. He first heard the music when he was 11. They'd left the trailer park in Bremerton, Justin yet dreaming of the brush of sword fern at his knees, blackberries purpling his palms, the shadowed root house he'd cleared beneath an enormous western red cedar, how that wall of cool dirt just fit the curve of his thin back. And he and his mother were living in a one-bedroom apartment north of Boeing Field. The complex was a square U, clanging metal stairs zigzagging up to the third story, where their unit sat halfway down the east side. The windows opened on the steel and cinders of the railroad tracks at an elevated stretch of I-5, traffic a constant clangor, trains rattling through at all hours, and without warning jets roaring over, obliterating for a moment the sounds of the neighbors who turned their TVs up and let their babies wail and slammed doors and yelled at one another in half a dozen languages. And 3, 4, 5 nights a week, there were his mother's sharp, drunken barks of laughter, the low, quick, cajoling voices of the various men she brought home from the bars. Justin would lie on his bed in the dark, the bedroom his, the rest of the apartment hers, and in an attempt to block out the noise, he tuned through the radio, turning the knob slowly so as not to miss a thing. He'd twist the antenna, flagged with tinfoil one way, then another, angling it toward the window this time, or even just holding on to it. His body, the conduit, his own bones carrying the signal. Up and down the FM band, he could usually tune in better than 30 stations. He'd listen to the Supersonics game for a while, then turn the knob down to find preachers bellowing and breaking into song and sometimes whispering, even weeping. There were late-night shows about UFOs, angry call-in shows about the news and music, so much music, when for as long as he could remember, his had been a house without. His mother and father had never bothered with music, though sometimes when they lived at the trailer park, someone over for a barbecue would roll the car windows down and play something loud and sure of itself on the stereo. A Mexican family lived in the trailer park as well, and on Sunday afternoons, the man of the house would sit in a lawn chair and drink yellow beer in clear glass bottles and play his guitar. Justin would coast as he biked by, marveling at the sad, intricate sounds lifting from the wooden body of the instrument and the man's own throat. He marveled at all the music. The swaggering rock he remembered belting from car stereos, the silences and crescendos of the classical station, lonesome warbling country tunes that reminded him of the songs the Mexican man sang. The top 40 with Casey Kasem counted down each week. And on lined notebook paper with blue pen, Justin listed the songs, noted which ones moved up and which ones moved down, and what then he should record on his one cassette tape. Bon Jovi this week, New Kids on the Block the next, Madonna, Richard Marx, Motley Crue. He taped the hits all summer. And eventually, Skid Row bled through Billy Joel, Garth Brooks blended with Debbie Gibson, and he liked it when this happened. The strange juxtapositions and sonic disruptions even better than the songs themselves. There in the dark of his room, the sharp discordant noise of the neighbors piercing the walls, the lights of late-night traffic stretching and disappearing behind broken blinds, Justin let the bleeding notes and twisted sounds fill him, and so was ready then, from when he first heard it, the music that would be his. Low on the dial one weekend afternoon, with his mom not at home, what else was there for a boy to do all Saturday except to eat sugar cereal in his underwear and listen to music? He found it. The lone bending bass riff joined by drums, then suddenly split by distorted driving guitar, and most of all, that voice. in the man's throat and nose, deep but breaking at the edges into a kind of glassy animal scream, as if he didn't care, and at the same time, this song right now mattered more than anything else in all the blasted world. Justin stopped dead. He fumbled his bowl under the chipped vinyl counter and wheeled into the bedroom. Behind him, the bowl wobbled and fell, milk and soggy O's splattering the cabinets, puddling on the linoleum. He didn't care. He turned the radio up, up, up. As the song faded, Justin grabbed his notebook and pencil. When the radio man said the band's name, said Nirvana, he wrote it down, wrote Nirvana, and underlined the word and circled it, and in the deepest, safest root house in his mind, put that astonishing sound in the same place he kept the clatter of the creek, the drip of ferns and cedars, put it there, and closed his eyes and let it play again and again. So once I'd found this character on the page, of course, the next question was who's going to find him in the movement of the book, in the movement of the novel. And the first thought that came to me was someone a lot like my grandfather, who was born in 1912 and died a year before the turn of the century, and who was someone who saw a kid like me and saw a kid like my brother, boys not exactly built for that world we were born into, and he really saw us. And I thought, well, I'm gonna run Justin into somebody like that, someone who might see him and see him for real. And so the other character we're going to encounter here is Rene Bouchard, whose wife of many years has just passed, and he's kind of run away as well. He's run from the town he lives in out to the ranch where he works. And one day this kid shows up. Maybe the only thing you need to know here, besides that, is that O'Malley is the dog. So the boy's shirt flapped out behind him as he loped across the road, his yellow hair hanging in his eyes. Rene worked a hand across his jaw and wished he had a hat to loan the kid. Viv and Leanne used to tie their hair back with a handkerchief, but Rene didn't know if he could suggest a thing like that to a boy. Didn't know the rules anymore, if he ever had. Rene put his shoulder to the shed door and rolled it open another couple of feet for what light there was and instructed O'Malley to keep watch. He pulled his penlight from his shirt pocket and stepped into the straw and dust and shadow of the shed. Justin, framed and backlit at the threshold, hesitated a moment, then followed. Even for the evening light, the shed was dark and still. The Coleman lantern burned across the way atop the table, the lambing station, and Rene swung his penlight in a slow arc. Most of the sheep were up, chewing their cuds and nosing one another. Some were settled down on their bellies or on their sides. Rene moved through the herd, talking to the sheep. Behind him, the boy breathed. "Are these sheep?" "These are sheep." "You don't have cows?" "No." Before Rene had gone out to find O'Malley herding this long-haired kid up and down the road, he'd had his eye on a ewe in the northwest corner of the shed. She hadn't been showing, but was hoofing at the straw, circling, baaing, huffing. He'd hung his hat up and washed, lit the lantern. "Are we going to feed the sheep?" "They've been fed." Rene took another couple of slow steps. He could almost hear the gears turning behind him. "What are we doing then?" "We're looking for ewes in labor." The soft crunching sounds of straw, the grunting and bleats of the sheep. "You mean labor like they're going to have a baby? A baby sheep?" "Yep." "Really?" "You're just in time for lambing season, Justin. If I didn't know better, I'd have thought you planned it." Rene grinned at his joke and swung the penlight. "I believe there's one over this way. Let's take a look." They found the ewe down, eyes closed, a neck stretched, her cheeks scraping the straw down to hard dirt. The boy leaned into the cone of light, then straightened up and backed away. The ewe's water had broken. A red membrane pooled at her backside, blood on her wooled legs. "Is it supposed to look like that? Is that okay?" "Nothing wrong yet. We'll just have to wait and see." So they did. There in the low sloped corner of the shed, they waited. Rene clicked off the penlight to save batteries, and the darkness eddied about them. The hum of the far lantern, the night sounds of the sheep clear and soft, the warm, ripe smells of dung and lanolin, the rich copper tang of blood on the air. Renee clicked the pen light back on. The ewe huffed and turned her face away, straining. Nothing more was showing. Renee touched Justin's shoulder. The boy flinched. Here, take this. Renee waggled the pen light. I had to wash up. Renee crossed to the sink and wet his arms up to the elbow. He scrubbed with pumice soap, rinsed, and dried his hands and arms on a small towel hung from a nail. He talked slow and soft as he moved through the herd. Justin, hearing him, flicked the cone of light from the ewe to Renee, then held the metal cylinder out to him, eager to be rid of it. You hold on to that. Keep the light on me. And I need you over here by the ewe. Kneel down and put a hand on her neck. Talk to her. If she starts to buck or get up, you just hold her down, gentle-like. Can you do that? Justin looked at him like this was surely a joke. And when he saw it wasn't, he shook his head. His long hair again fell into his eyes. I don't know anything about this. You don't have to. You'll learn. Just listen. Renee thought this might be the moment, that this might be too much. The boy would refuse, then turn and run, do something worse. He was 3 or 4 inches shorter than Renee, and angular, skinny, face of blade, eyes a startling blue. The boy moved either hurriedly or not at all, and with a jerk of the shoulders. Renee would have said he looked fragile, already broken. Maybe he was, but there was yet more to him. He'd somehow made his way out here, still on his own 2 feet. Justin looked a moment longer at Renee to make sure, then swore under his breath and stepped around the ewe and knelt down, shone the penlight in Renee's face. Not in my eyes, here, my hands. Renee leaned against a support beam and attempted to kneel. Halfway down, his hip and knee gave way. He hit the dirt hard. The kid bobbled the penlight. You okay? Just keep the light where I need it. Renee righted himself and gritted through the pain. Christ Jesus, this is going to be tougher than he thought. He put his left hand on the ewe's side and with the other reached in. The ewe tensed and grunted against the pain. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. The light wavered as Justin fell forward, his hand and forearm coming down on the bucking ewe's neck. That's right. Hold her. Renee was nearly up to his elbow now, his nose full of shit and blood and the inside meat of things, the contraction squeezing down on him, and with his fingertips he felt the shoulder, no, the haunch of a lamb. It was coming breech. That was the trouble. I've got to turn it. Justin made a sound that might have been a curse or a breath, but he kept the light steady, and turn by turn Renee repositioned the lamb, the ewe wheezing, grunting, till he had one foreleg, had both. In a clean motion, Renee pulled, and the lamb slid into the straw. He ran a finger through its mouth and set it on its mother's belly, where the wet thing gave a thin blat, a pitiful little sound. But it jerked the ewe's head up. She licked at the lamb. The light had gone jittery. Oh, wow, fuck, wow. You just reached in and got that thing. Keep the light steady. The next lamb was coming now, had been waiting on the first, and it slid free with an easy tug. Renee cleared its mouth as well and plopped it down by the first 2 good-sized little ewe lambs. The mother, still on her side, with just her head lifted, fussed over both, licking at them in turn, but then stiffened, gave another baw and heaved. A third lamb emerged, this one half the size of the other 2, a little buck, glassy-eyed and hunched. Renee swiped his pinky through its mouth, but the lamb wasn't breathing. He bent down and cupped the tiny nose and blew right at its nostrils. 1, 2, 3 short, hard breaths, and the lamb coughed and sneezed, kicked his way to life. Renee laid this one by the other 2 and sat back in the straw. The ewe licked at the lambs and passed the afterbirth, and the whole time the kid kept up a steady stream of exclamations, the light flicking from Renee to the lambs to Renee. I didn't know there'd be 3. Wow, holy shit. Look at them, 3 of those little things. Thank you. I thought I'd read 2 poems, if that's okay. This is the title poem from my newest collection, Pastoral 1994. Pastoral 1994. My friend and I are on the front porch, forgetting whose can of beer is whose, as if our throats are, as all the long day the rest of us, interchangeable. Our guts just rattling buckets of staples and nails, our hands the hammers, backs the boards. Before us, the sere grass of the field falls away. In the near hills, coyotes yammer about all the bones and joints they plan beneath the moon's odd eye to unfasten. We are leaned up against raw boards, legs splayed out like jackstraws. We are the unwritten verse in any George Strait song, the one where it all goes wrong, if it hasn't already. I am reaching for one of two empty cans. I am grieving the hours before we are set once again to wake. In other lands, young men are given to dreaming of tomorrow and tomorrow, but his father is the one who will in good time lose the ranch. My father is the one years gone. We each of us in our fist hold now a vessel drained of everything but the night, which we tip and tip to our lips. One more poem. So when my kids were little, they always asked for a bedtime story, and the stories they loved most were stories about when I was their age and made bad choices. But one night, when my son was much younger than he is now and much smaller, he's much bigger than me now, I said, "What kind of a story do you want tonight, bud?" And he said, and he was kind of half asleep, kind of drifting, and he said, Tell me the story about when we were birds." And I thought, well, okay. And I tried to tell a story, and then the next day started revising it into this poem. So my son asks for the story about when we were birds. When we were birds, we veered and wheeled, we flapped and looped. It's true, we flew. When we were birds, we dined on tiny silver fish and the watery hearts of flowers. When we were birds, we sistered the dragonfly, brothered the night-wise bat, and sometimes when we were birds, we rose as high as we could go, light, cold, and strange. When we opened our beaked mouths, sundown poured like wine down our throats. When we were birds, we worshipped rivers, trees, mountains, rain, sage knots, gizzard rocks, grub-shot dung piles, and like all good beasts and wise green things, the mothering sun. We had many gods when we were birds, and each was good to us in her own way, even winter fog, which found us huddling in salal or silk tassel, singing low, sweet songs and closing our blood-rich eyes and sleeping the troubled sleep of birds. Yes, even when we were birds, we were sometimes troubled and tired, sad for no reason, so pretended we were not birds. Fell like stones, the earth hurtling up to meet us, our trussed bones readying to be shattered, our unusually large hearts pounding for nothing. Yet at the last minute we would flap and lift, and as we flew shudderingly away, we told ourselves that this falling we would remember. We didn't know. We thought we would always be birds. We didn't know. We didn't know we could love one another with such ferocity that we should. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Wow, today was a great day. You all had, those of you who are in workshops, had your morning workshops. Hopefully you learned some things. And then we gathered for lunch out on the lawn in the sunshine. And then Stephanie Elizondo Grice kind of blew people away with her craft talk. Hopefully it was a cheering thing. It was amazing. And then our friends at the Josephi Center for Arts and Culture came with an art activity, which was great. That's what we try to do at Summer Fishtrap, is to celebrate other organizations in Wallowa County by bringing the Josephi Center, and tomorrow Maxwell Heritage Center is going to be here, and we're going to bring David Mildrexler here to do a tree walk. And so it's fun to not only bring new things, but to kind of show off all the other things that are going on in Wallowa County, all the great work that's happening. Tonight, Jennifer Hobbs, they're here. Tonight is our second evening of nightly drawings for fish trappers. Are you fish trap curious? It's our monthly sustaining a membership program for folks who, for as little as $5 a month, you can help us keep the lights on. And all of those of you who are fish trappers or become fish trappers this week, get in this raffle drawing every night. What might people win tonight?
Well, they might win some fish trap swag and 2 tickets to mini golf. I might just be teasing you, though. So.
I have to, Clara, is it classic mini golf or is it
It's the fancy mini golf. And the fish trap swag is a t-shirt for this summer. It's the home t-shirt. And if it's not the size you desire or the design you desire, you may swap it.
All right. Ready? You want to pick it?
Oh, do I have to pick it again? Reverend Clarissa.
Clarissa playing mini golf. This is going to be great.
Thanks to everybody.
Okay, our third reader tonight is Erica Berry. Erica attended Summer Fishtrap back in 2017 as a participant, and so it's one of my favorite things is when folks who came also come to then teach. And Erica has been having a blast, I think, so far, as we have in having Erica here. Erica Berry is the author of Wolfish, Wolf, Self, and the Stories We Tell About Fear, which won the 2024 Oregon Book Award and was the finalist for the Pacific Northwest Book Award. Her essays, which often explore the intersection of our emotional lives and the natural world, have appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Outside, The Guardian, and the Yale Review, and other publications. A contributing editor at Orion Magazine, she has taught at the Orion Summer Environmental Writers Workshop, the Sitka Center for the Arts and Ecology, the New York Times Student Journeys, and the 2019-2020 Writer-in-Residence at the National Writers Series in Traverse City, Michigan, and now at Summer Fishtrap, right? I added that part. Forthcoming visiting environment writer at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington. She is also an associate fellow at the Attic Institute in her hometown of Portland, Oregon. Welcome to the podium, Erica Berry.
This is such a treat to be here. Thank you to the fellow faculty for being so inspiring. My reading is kind of bringing together the 2 readings we heard today, because there will be both references to sheep and women going through hard things. And thank you to Shannon and Mike and the volunteers in Wallowa Lake Lodge. This is a dream. Thank you also to my workshop, who are making me feel so buoyed, and what I needed as a prescription for what the world's doing right now to be here. So thank you all for bringing that. And I was just reminded that somebody in the crowd taught me how to write my name as a kid. Alan Schaffler was my preschool teacher, and she lives here now, and she's here. So a round of applause to all the teachers who have affected us, I think. I started this book in Wallowa County in 2013. And I was a junior in college out here on a grant to interview stakeholders about wolf repopulation. And I had become interested in the topic because my uncle in Montana, who's a big game taxidermist, had a bumper sticker on his truck. And I think I'm sort of blurring it with other bumper stickers I'd seen, but I think it was wolves government-sponsored terrorists. And I'm a non-confrontational person. And I didn't want to ask my sweet uncle what was going on and what the wolf meant to him. So I embarked on a 10-year project to figure out what the wolf meant. And I another thing had happened. So I was here doing research this June in college, and then I went home and I was leading a canoe trip in the backcountry of Maine, or I was at school in Maine, and I was up in northern Maine where there's no cell phone service. And as I was going in, my dad called, and he said, "Your mom's in the hospital. It's been a few days. We haven't wanted to freak you out. If something's really bad, she's got this really high fever, and it's like 104, and then it drops, then it's 104, it drops. We're doing all these tests." And my mom was young and healthy, and I was scared to go out of service. There was talk about us flying back. And we're like portaging with our canoes. And I get a call, and it's like, we figured it out. An epidemiologist came in and talked to her. And last week we were at the Metolius, and she got a tick bite. And it's there's a rising fever. I'm blanking on the name. And what the epidemiologist said very casually in the emergency room was, I'm seeing a lot of illnesses like this. And if we had more predators in the wild, like wolves, we would have a better controlled ecosystem where you'd have fewer rodents coming into the cabins. And it was just an offhand thing, this epidemiologist said. And I then went into the woods for a week. And I was thinking about the fact that my mother, this person who I loved more than anyone that I knew how to love, had gone into the woods and been bit by a creature. And it was reminding me of Little Red Riding Hood in reverse. Because in this story, the wolf was not, the biter. The wolf was maybe part of this whole thing. And it was the first time that I started thinking, I'd been studying wolves in this kind of academic sense, and I began to think about the fact that the wolves and I were both animals in an ecosystem, and we were sharing a lot of the same, our lives were interconnected. And I began to think about the wolf. The cultural taxidermy is the phrase I think about the wolf. Who was this? Why did I think the things I thought about the wolf? But also for my own body. And I began to think about that story of Little Red Riding Hood as a story that had ensnared both of us in it. The wolf as the villain, and me, a young white woman, so often as a victim. And I was uncomfortable with both of these narratives. Because I was so sick of it, I was surprised to realize that the farther I got from girlhood, the more I thought of Little Red. At first, I believed it was because this story carried all the lessons I needed to ditch. Wolves are trapped in folkloric narrative that defines them just as firmly as women, and like women, they are feared and reviled for their potentially predatory power, writes South African fairy tale scholar Jessica Tiffin. If I just untangled Little Red's story, I thought, maybe I could free us from it. Free the women, free the wolves. I could be the huntsman smirking with my axe. I see now this was wishful thinking. In a fairy tale of regressive lessons, it was not the lies in that story that tugged me back. It was its bulb of truth, that fear, some fear, might be useful to me after all. So I was a very adventurous young person, and I was often going off alone, and I didn't really see that fear was it just felt like a foreign thing that I was uncomfortable with. And then very quickly, around the time I started studying wolves, unrelated to what I was studying academically, I felt like fear had swamped my life. It had flooded it. I was very preoccupied, and I'd had a couple situations. And so 2 of the chapters in this book are about Little Red Riding Hood, sort of going into that story, and The Boy Who Cried Wolf. And there's real wolves and symbolic wolves. And I'm going to read you a bit from each of those chapters. This is kind of like a mixtape. There's sort of sections that are coming in between. So, there are only 2 real plots, a teacher told me once. The story of the stranger who comes to town, and the story of the one who leaves. All stories are about wolves, wrote novelist Margaret Atwood. All worth repeating, that is. The summer before middle school, I went with 2 friends to a girls' empowerment camp in a meadow outside Eugene, Oregon. My friends went for a weekend the summer before and came back giddy with girl power and henna tattoos, but we weren't at the 7-day session long before they admitted this was a stronger brew. The teenage counselors waved us with sage smoke and robbed us of flip phones and wristwatches, locking them in the white-haired director's ranch house. At night, we slept in a giant circle of sleeping bags on the dewy grass of what was, I now realize, her front yard. Activities included walking the labyrinth painted onto her driveway, passing around the cold beak of a cervical speculum, and crouching in the ferns, told not to come out until our spirit animals appeared. Without language to articulate why this summer camp felt so bad, I began to suspect I just didn't know how to have fun. At the buffet-style meals, I ate one plate of tofu pasta salad after another, desperate to feel soothed. I left the camp with a little turd of earthy clay strung on yarn around my neck and a bubblegum-colored t-shirt signed by my peers. "Girls kick butt," someone scrawled next to a peace sign on my shoulder. In the spirit of a lower back tattoo, my friend had sharpied "strong, independent woman" right above the hem, where the shirt fell above my non-existent ass. The camp strived in admirable ways to teach us feminist self-reliance, so often missing in the Western fairy tales I'd grown up with. But the punchline that stays with me now was, I realize, the same as in Little Red Riding Hood, that the boys were out to get us. We sat crisscross in a circle one afternoon, wide-eyed as the counselors passed around a tube of pepper spray and told us to carry one at all times, especially on dates with boys we thought we might like. Just as the wolf knocks on this, I've never read this aloud, so it hasn't occurred to me that it's funny. Just as the wolf knocks on the sick grandmother's door, feigning the disguise of Little Red so he can eat the geriatric and assume her boudoir post, so we were told our dates would do anything to get us into bed. I had grown up knowing not to get in cars with strangers, but I do not remember my parents giving a gendered shape to their warnings. This was the early 2000s, a time of glossy commercialized girl power, of Take Your Daughter to Work Day and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Of course, I knew men could be creeps, but I was wading into middle school with girls whom I had seen do terrifying things. Camp was the first time a woman looked me in the eye and told me the men were out to trick us. That, or it was the first time I wondered if I should listen. The lesson was delivered, like the a cappella goddess chants we sang to the constellations, as a secret of our sisterhood. And as with those lessons, I scoffed. I was a skeptic who missed her wristwatch, and deciding to fear men felt like deciding to put faith in the director's healing crystals. Until I saw the evidence with my own eyes, I would continue to doubt its weight in my life. I became compelled by the wolf because I was intrigued by the investigation of a body that could be both feared and feared for, sometimes simultaneously. I wanted to unspool the cultural narratives that both constructed and concealed my layman's perception of it. Okay, sorry. So I remember once talking to a biologist, and he was talking about wolves in Yellowstone, and he said, you know, the prey controls the predator. And I realized in that moment that the part of me that had been a poet in high school was never going to leave, and I was going to be thinking about metaphor even as I was trying to understand fact and science and policy. And I began thinking about how does that apply to my own worlds where I was grappling with those themes. I was really preoccupied with the fact that the narratives around fear that were in my human world had been told to us and sold to us. Someone was benefiting off them, somebody was being harmed off them. I did not trust those narratives of fear. And, you know, when you are going through a period of intense fear, the self-help books will tell you, oh, you just have to, like, get over that fear. And I wanted to figure out how I'd gotten into that fear. So my grandfather lived, when my father grew up, on a sheep farm that was about 2 hours from my home in Portland. We spent a lot of time there. There's a story my gramps likes to tell about one of my early visits to the farm. I must have been 2 or 3, toddling. We're walking toward the barn, and I'm running ahead in grass already mowed to fuzz by the herd, probably chasing butterflies, those ones that appeared each spring to surf the breeze like shreds of torn lavender tissue paper. I turn a corner, round a hill, and stop. I've seen something, made eye contact with it. Gramps, I say, breathless, running back to his ambling frame, his boots nearly my height. There's a wolf. There's an animal ahead, eyes glassy but alert, her neck hooked in a metal snare trap. As an environmentalist, Gramps believed in the conservation of wild spaces and their inhabitants, but here on the farm he was a tender, and he reckoned those two aims with seeming little angst. His responsibility for the sheep was love, but also business. His job was to keep the flock alive. On the ground, from a distance, the animal is my size. For a second, we watch each other. Her breath surely labored. Did she know she would die? Did I? She's not a wolf. Gramps knows that immediately. There are no known wolves in Western Oregon at this point in the early 1990s. My wolf is just a coyote. But I am a child, and I know only stories, and the wolf in my stories looms big. The wolf is the beast that gets the sheep, and I love the lambs. I lean over the rose-colored bathtub and help bottle feed the ones whose mothers have, for whatever reason, turned away. What did I feel watching that predator? I would like to think I cried on instinct, aware I was witnessing a brink of death, but I'm not sure. There is a chance I may have felt like we had won, like this was the last threat, like we had saved all the lambs. Or maybe, and this is worse to consider, I saw the animal I thought was wolf and did not realize that we had won. Maybe I thought the animal was still a threat, so I ran to grab my grandfather's hand. Maybe I saw panic in the animal's eyes and mistook it for my own. Gramps does not have answers to tell me about what happened after I got him, and when I asked recently, he waved it off, eyes floating elsewhere. He began to tell another story. So many of his stories are tall, stretched, sculpted. Does it go without saying I have no memory of the encounter with the trap? No memory of the creature I thought was wolf? No memory of what twitched inside me when, if, I rounded the corner alone and looked her in the eye? In French, the word loup means wolf, but in other contexts, it can also mean other things. An error in calculation, for example. Pluralized, it's the black velvet mask one wears to a costume ball. Both definitions suggest one's first impression of a wolf can be wrong, or rather imperfect. The truth is not always what it seems. Not long after arriving in Minneapolis for graduate school, I biked too far across the city to attend the birthday party of an acquaintance. Underestimating the length of the journey on unfamiliar roads, I arrived late and sweaty in a new sundress. I had a beer, but after an hour, I knew I had to go. The sky hummed with low light, and I didn't want to navigate a 5-mile journey in total dark. It was August, and the air was so humid it felt swaddling, protective. I hugged my friend on the patio. I went inside to pay. Watching a bartender escort a belligerent white man out, drunk or high or both, my mind raised a familiar red flag of vigilance. Still, what to do? That flag rose so many times a day. Guess I didn't say trigger warning for the Little Red Riding Hood things that happen in our everyday lives, but this is not in the very bad spectrum of those things. The flag rose so many times a day. I signed the receipt and walked outside. Now the man was arguing with the guy who checked IDs at the door. I headed down the sidewalk, Pilsner softening my limbs. I was dreading the bike ride home, annoyed at the stubbornness that had prevented me from driving. When I heard the thunk, thunk, thunk of footsteps behind me, I told myself to be cool, to keep walking, to chill out. A split second later, I changed my mind, turning just as the man flung his arms around my neck and pressed his body against mine. He did not threaten me, not exactly. He told me he thought I was someone he had loved, someone who had left him, and now he did not want to let me go. His breath was hot against my cheek. My back bent under his leaning weight, and I wondered if we would both fall to the ground and what would happen then. My future appeared like a multiple choice question, and I knew I had to act, to scream, scold, punch, kick, grab that pepper spray in my purse, but my body felt immobile, my throat dry. In France, a hoarse voice can be called le loup, you who have been silenced by the fear of a wolf, the story goes. This man was not a wolf, but his action had cast us in an all too familiar story, one I hated, but that I had rehearsed internally on so many nights. The improbable had happened. The strange man had grabbed me on the dark street. It was a shock to be held by a stranger, but also to realize my reaction. Shame floated above my body, judging it, my slack limbs, my too quiet mouth. This is a moment where you could try punching someone, I thought, but the man was making yowling noises as he screamed, and the other part of me thought, can you really punch a whimpering man, or pinch? I tried to shrug away his arms, but when they did not move, I walked ahead, staggering, dragging. A man stood on the sidewalk ahead, a decade or two older than me, about the age of the assailant, and he watched us for a beat before asking if I needed help. It's fine, the man behind me slurred. He was shouting, but he also sounded near tears. She left me and now she hates me. Everybody does. I shook my head, the most I could do to rebuke his claims. I pitied this man more than I hated him, but I didn't want to fight. I wanted to disappear, splinter, evaporate, like the video I just watched on YouTube of fainting goats. They trot blissfully through the grass until the human they are with pops open an umbrella, and one by one the animals freeze, then fall. Fear overwhelms their bodies as heat overwhelms an engine. Help would be great, I said, as if I were in Home Depot trying to find a strange tool. As the second man began to pry the first off my back, the first started fighting with fists and yells, and for a moment I just stood in the glare of the streetlight, watching them twist, the first man still shouting that he knew me and I'd done him wrong. It seemed I should now help the second man get free, that we should continue this seesaw of intervention until the first tired out. Run, the second man said through his teeth. I'm calling the cops. Or did he say that? How did he get his phone out while they were entangled? Was there a third person who appeared? I don't remember. I didn't see. I was already running across the street where my bike leaned in the shadows. The lock was jammed. I rattled the key and shook the frame, adrenaline radioactive in my palms. In the distance, sirens. The red-blue lights were glowing on distant buildings by the time I was on the bike, but by then I was pedaling as fast as I could. I had no direction. The only destination was away. I did not want to talk to the police. I was not sure what I would tell them. The man had not been explicitly violent, though he had violated my body and my space. I felt like a victim, but I did not want to testify as one. I did not trust the carceral response. Later, the parallel would emerge, inescapable. Just as with running into that group of masked men on my college quad, this encounter had happened in my first weeks in a new place I was trying to make home. It was a Wednesday in September, but both of them on a Wednesday in September, to be exact. Just as then, I was unsure how to narrate what had happened. Had I ever actually been in physical danger? Entre chien et loup. Was it a dog or a wolf? Should pause and say that this is the hour of entre chien et loup, which comes from this Latin phrase between dog and wolf that refers to dusk. And the idea is that this is the hour when if you see a figure walking towards you, you can't quite tell what it is. And your sense of whether this is a wolf or a dog is met by a lot of, that is a physical reaction, but it's also a very mental, internal one, because you're thinking about all the stories you've been told about who you will meet and what will happen if you meet them. And traditionally, when I looked into the sort of etymology of this phrase, there's both a fear of anticipation, but also perhaps like a quiver of excitement and intrigue. I wanted to know if my body's reaction was earned to my fear, because that night, as the one years earlier, clung to me, or not to me, but the home I was trying to make. I no longer wanted to walk or bike if it wasn't daylight, even just a few blocks. I stopped wearing the sundress, wondering if it might always have been too short, subscribing to the broken belief that the right hem might protect me. I gripped the key to my old car, and when I couldn't find parking within a block of wherever I was going, my breath quickened, that old pepper spray in palm. I knew I was being irrational, that the odds of my being grabbed by a stranger were just ridiculously low. At the same time, my body held a memory, and the memory would not go. A few years later, I published a short essay online about the difference between lone wolves and men. At the end, I mentioned briefly what had happened with the stranger on the street, that it had recalled that old myth of girl in forest and wolf in trees, and the comparison had really bothered me. Someone named Wild Swan left a comment beneath the essay, recommending a local martial arts studio where I might purge my fears rolling with an awesome bunch of guys. This suggestion was preceded by a caveat, an assumption that the attack on you wasn't a literary addition. I knew online comments were often the scum curdled on the pond of the internet, but those words really slid under my skin. Wild Swan did not call me a liar, not directly, but they floated the possibility I had lied, that I had invented an attack for attention to make a rhetorical point. My fury radiated out to all those accused of making up literary additions and much worse. Internally, it is true, I carried so many questions about that night, about what had been coursing through the man's body and mind, what would have happened if I had tried to fight him, if someone else had not intervened. But the possibility that someone else would question my account came, this time, as a surprise. I was naive. Anyone who has experienced something on that spectrum of harassment and microaggression to assault and the physical sort will recognize these phases of gut acceptance. First, you learn the chemical power of your body's fear, how swiftly it can light up every joint and vein, like the fluorescent gene scientists splice into monkeys to make them glow. Next, you learn the loneliness of it. Not only might you be alone in your fear, you might be alone in your belief of it. Another's doubt can be viral. You can see it in their body and stay away, but though you never catch it, not really. Your life is infected by the possibility, the question of what if, that you have overreacted, that you have misjudged, that you are wrong to feel so much. A buzz in the skull, a twitch in the throat. Soon the call of doubt begins to ring from inside your own house. If you claim to see a wolf that is not actually there, and if you dread the arrival of the animal, then surely you are crying wolf. This is an injustice both to truth and to animal. But what if you cry wolf, and what you really mean to cry is life itself? Or what if, through the sediment of the years, you have come to believe a wolf is present? A lie is not a lie if the teller believes it, writes Maggie Smith in her poem Parachute. I want to believe her. And yet, 19th century Swedes once used the concept of a wolf story to describe the popular genre of juicy stories with somewhat weak credibility. Historian Karen Dirk cites the example of a Swedish woman who in 1888 claimed she saw a wolf. 23 armed men went after it, and what they first thought could be a bear turned out only to be a large rock. Because the woman's fear was unfounded, the anecdote suggests that she was made a punchline, the fool. But if a wolf story connoted a certain kind of storyteller, it also suggested how readily the wolf became a vessel for other fears. A wolf story was obviously understood as a story about humans' general fear of nature, writes Dirk. Studying 17th and 18th century Germany, the historian Martin Reinheimer came to a similar conclusion. Every threat that issued forth from all-powerful nature could now be given a name, the name of wolf. The entire fear of death was put into the wolf hunt. To talk about seeing a wolf has, so often, been code for talking about seeing fear itself. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Did you like what you heard tonight? That's right. Well, all three of our featured readers will be up in the lobby at the book loft. You can talk to them, visit with them, maybe buy a book and have them sign them. We'd love to. It's a great opportunity to talk to Karen and Joe and Erica and all the other faculty who are here and each other, make connections, catch up with each other again, make new friends. Tomorrow night, excuse me. We have three more of the Summer Fishtrap instructors. This is a great one, too. Anis Majgani, Nina McConaughey, and Stephanie Elizondo Grice. So we'll see you tomorrow at 7:30.